So my son went into his distance learning experience in March of his kindergarten year. And then he dealt with all that school was in first grade. And then he spent most of second grade wearing a mask and social distancing and living by constantly changing protocols and quarantining. Essentially, he was experiencing the new normal. Except for him, my little boy, this has always been the norm. He doesn't know a school experience without a pandemic. And for kids who did experience school before COVID, the memories of school in the past are a distant, faded memory. It's been a while since students experienced a normal time in school. And this is a long time for kids to spend in limbo, to operate out of survival mode, and to experience this daily disruption. And this kind of disruption is impactful. I mean, if you're an adult, in a sense, this pandemic still feels recent, like a crisis that we had to figure out, and yet it also feels like forever. We got used to the disturbance and living in stress and just expecting to be in survival mode every day. Well, for younger students, it almost is there forever. This reality is heavy. And if you're an educator teaching and leading in this mostly post-pandemic world, you've probably seen the result of this heaviness, this disruption in your students. And it's not just academic learning loss that I'm talking about. I mean, there's certainly been an academic impact on students throughout all this. But if you talk to most teachers and parents, and you see on the ground level what they're looking at, everyone is saying that this isn't the biggest concern right now. The largest disruption of the last 3 school years is a social one. From isolation at home to spread out lunchrooms, uneven schedules, canceled sports, divided recesses, COVID impacted social development, and it's potentially stunting student development. A lack of social interaction affects engagement. I mean, I teach a hybrid college class, and for one of my classes, I split my students into groups on Zoom to have discussions based on several prompts that I gave them. And for accountability, I asked that someone in their group would record their responses and then submit them afterwards. Well, for a little extra accountability, I hopped around to each Zoom room to listen in on discussions, and every single one of them was absolutely silent when I got there. I mean, screens off and on mute. Well, what I learned is that each group was splitting up the prompts and answering each of them individually, and then they would just combine them and turn that in for credit. Well, I was a little shocked. I mean, these were relevant discussion questions that I came up with for them. And so I asked every group, why were you doing it like this? The instructions were for you to discuss. I mean, are you guys just being lazy? But the unanimous response that I received was, discussing is just so uncomfortable. I mean, I know that getting students to discuss is not a new problem that was introduced by the pandemic. I'm sure that Plato faced some of those same problems with his students. But to see it with every single one of the groups just felt different. This lack of social interaction is affecting engagement. And this is going to have a long-term impact on students and who they are the rest of their lives if we don't act. So what do we do? How do we help our students cope with the abnormality and social learning loss of the last 3 school years? Well, I think what if the primary emphasis of school right now is not hitting every single standard listed in the Common Core? What if teachers weren't spending their time and energy trying to hit every single objective to decrease the academic deficit caused by COVID? Instead, what if the primary objective of school was addressing the most pressing needs of our students, the chief of which may be social connection? The classroom needs to be a place where students are working together, finding community, and learning how to talk to others and build relationships and solve problems and experience healthy conflict and express creativity and connect with others. I mean, academics still belong, hear me loud and clear. But what if they weren't the center of our focus, the center of testing, the center of teacher evaluations, the center of stress and anxiety right now? I mean, what if instead play was, or collaboration, or relationships? And we realize that when students are engaged in those areas, academic success usually follows. And now that the pandemic is behind us, let's knock on wood real quick, but now that it is behind us, what if we kept this emphasis on socialization? Caring for the whole child and their social development is what students need during disruptive chapters of life, but it's what they need the rest of the time as well. I know the idea of resetting school because of COVID has become a little redundant, but what a waste it would be if there was no adaptation despite all of this opportunity. This moment we are in can serve as a catalyst for change and growth. And so teachers, how can you orient your class and curriculum to meet your students' most pressing needs? Administrators, how can you give your teachers the trust and support to do so? And parents, if you happen to be watching this, how can you advocate and support this as well? Because here's the reality. This disruption is hard. It has been hard. But disruption almost always leads to evolution. And I think we'd all agree that the education system could use a little evolution right now.